I think we're live here. Hello, and welcome to the 741 channel. Thank you for stopping by. It's a Sunday morning. It's a little bit drippy outside, so I thought it might be a good time to kind of play around with the new RSPduo that I have here. Nothing really formal here set up. I've got the radio set up so it can receive ATSC traffic on one of the dual tuners, and I've got the ADSB data on the other. So we'll kind of mess around with that a little bit this morning and then just see where it goes from there. Now, before I get too far into this, I'll let you know that I'm running a different computer than I have in the past. This is my wife's laptop. It's a little bit better than the computers I have down here in the shack, and it can handle the dual tuners on the RSPduo and live streaming. Some of my older hardware just kind of struggles with that. So this ought to run good. But the caveat here is that I don't have the battery charger for the laptop. So our time is going to be limited to whatever battery life is left on this thing. So if I disappear abruptly, well, you'll know what happened. Anyway, let me get over here set up on my monitoring computer. In case anybody jumps in the chat, we can kind of see that and follow along. And I guess we'll just kind of get started and mess around and see where we go. In case anybody jumps, I guess I got to turn that down so we don't get any feedback. Mute that, and I think we're good to go. Okay, so without further ado, let me switch over to the screen so you guys can see what's going on over here. Okay, so we've got, so I can use the right mouse here. I'll mute the audio on that for a moment. So what I've got up here on the top, if you're not familiar with the RSPduo, we've got a dual tuner set up here. So the top tuner is receiving the ATSC aircraft voice traffic, so you can hear the planes. Now, having said that, I'm not an aviation buff. I don't have all the frequencies memorized, and I didn't really look them up before this video. So we're just kind of wing it here. I'll tune around and see what we can hear. But then down here, you can see that I am tracking some aircraft. You can kind of see there's 3 or 4 on the screen now. It's showing their tracks and whatnot. And this is set up with the second receiver. And that, well, I guess it's not displaying the feed here, but there's an interactive, oh, there it is. Now you can see it. This is a program called Dump 1090, also available from SDRplay. And this has got control of, well, I guess in this case, Tuner 2. And it is receiving the data from the aircraft kind of in the background. So this is just running in the background. And it's feeding its data to something called Virtual Radar Server, which is another application that is able to ingest this data, process it, and then display the results on a Google map. So that's kind of where we're at. We're just looking at that stuff now. So let me, I guess I'll check the chat here for a minute. We got a couple people in there. We've got Terry Henderson and Billy Ramirez. Let's see, have you ever given your first name? I think I have, but if you weren't paying attention, you probably would have missed it. I did try to send you an email, Billy, but I had trouble. I remember I was at work and I was trying to access my email through there, and it gave me problems and I couldn't do it. And then I completely forgot about it. I'll get you an email here one of these days. Or if you just look me up, you can send me an email. If you just look in the my about page on the YouTube, maybe you'll get a better response that way. But hopefully everybody can hear the audio. Everything sounds okay and looks okay. If you can't, comment in or whatever. But really, this is where we're at here. This is, if people aren't familiar, this is the brand new RSPduo from SDRplay. This is a dual tuner unit. So it's got 2 separate independent tuners that can be controlled independently and tuned to different parts of the spectrum. It's a little bit different than their previous offerings, which some of them had dual antenna ports, but you couldn't tune the tuners to different parts of the band. You had to stay within kind of one slice, usually 10 megahertz being the maximum. So anyway, that's where we're at. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions about how this works or anything, but it's pretty straightforward. It's very similar in nature to the way that the previous SDRplay products work, where you have SDRuno running and the software is, like I said, more or less the same. The differences are up here in the main tuner window. We have some additional controls that we can use to kind of play with the tuners and set up either dual mode or single mode. And you can see that right now up here in the top. I don't know if you guys can follow the cursor here. I didn't have time to set my wife's computer up to do exactly what I wanted to do, but you can see this is where we would change the mode. Now I can't change it at the moment because it's kind of locked in. But if we were to stop it and stuff, you'd see that there's a couple of options here under this button. Let's see. Tom's in there now. He's saying uploading a show on your intro to this SDR. Okay, Tom, that's great. This is a neat unit, Tom. I was fortunate enough to get sort of a early copy of it and play around with it ahead of the release, and it's really nice. There's a lot of extra features here, and just the internal architecture gives it a little bit more performance than the previous versions. I wish I'd had a little more time to play with it ahead of time. Things have been busy with work and all that sort of thing. I'm actually getting ready to change jobs right now, so things have been a little stressful on the home front, so to speak. But that's where we're at. I had a few minutes this morning, so I figured I'd jump on here and fool with this if anybody had any questions or wanted to see anything in particular. But I'm going to unmute the audio and see if we can hear any aircraft data or aircraft ATSC signals here. And again, I mentioned it earlier in the video, I'm not an aviation buff, so I don't have all the frequencies down, and I didn't have time to look them up ahead of time, but we'll kind of scan around here. And again, if the audio is good or bad or whatever, or the video is bad or good, please comment on that. Just let me know if we need to make any changes here. I am running a different computer than I normally do, and I did some testing, and I think it's going to work out okay. Oh, here we go. Here's the signal. So let's see if that gives us a little more. I'll turn the squelch on here and kind of mute that while it's not active. So let's see. It looks like we've lost our aircraft. Now, one thing I'll mention here in terms of antennas, I'm not really using, I guess, what you'd call proper antennas for the application, but they do work for me. The antenna that I've connected to Tuner 2, the one that's receiving the ADSB aircraft tracking data, is just a 2-meter VHF vertical antenna that I use for 2-meter repeater work usually. But it's the closest thing I have to the 1 gigahertz frequency, so I've put it out there, and it usually seems to work pretty good. Just before I started the live stream here, I had about a dozen planes all on the screen at once, but now it's kind of cut back, as you can see. The second antenna that I'm using on Tuner 1 is my 40 and 80 meter fan dipole that's out in the trees. It's horizontally polarized, and it's cut for 40 and 80 meters, but it seems to receive all over the place, reasonably well. It's not the best antenna for this application, but good enough for demonstration purposes and kind of messing around like I do. I'm not a serious air traffic buff or anything, so this is good enough to just kind of fool with it on a rainy Sunday morning. So let me look in the chat again. Let's see. Billy says he tried many times to use SDRplay with my rigs and my RSP1A and was very complicated for me getting rig control as such. I wound up using SDR console, which is much simpler. Now, I haven't tried rig control with mine, so I don't know exactly the steps involved. I don't know if I have a rig that's easily controlled in the first place anyway, so I haven't tried all that. But for basic use, I know what you're saying. SDR console is a little less intimidating. I'm sort of used to sort of complicated software with lots of buttons and menus and all kinds of stuff like that. Part of my daily work involves the use of software like that. So for me, SDRuno is fine. I kind of like it, but I haven't tried the rig control with it yet. At some point, I would like to kind of fool with that, but again, I don't have a lot of time, not as much time as I'd like anyway. Let's see. So Tom is asking, I have a question from one of my viewers. What is the minimum hardware you need to run SDRuno? Well, I can't give you a exact minimum, Tom, but what I can tell you is that when I first started fooling with this stuff, well, I guess it was about a year ago or so, I first set it up on an old Windows 95 computer that I had. I set up SDRuno on it, I think, if memory serves me. And yeah, I think it was the Windows 95. I put it on there, or no, I'm sorry, not 95, XP. I put it on Windows XP. That was a Celeron processor laptop. I'm not even sure how old it was or what the memory is. I have it over here. I just don't remember the specs on it. And it worked fine. You had to keep the bandwidth a little narrow and sort of like that, but it worked okay. So I guess the point is, if you have older hardware, an older computer, it's pretty lightweight, unless you're doing something like this with the new RSPduo, where you've got two tuners going. That's going to use a little bit more CPU power and things like that. So you may need a little bit better spec computer. My quote unquote, what I'll call normal computer, is a 5-year-old AMD Athlon processor. I think it's a 2.6 gigahertz processor. It's quad core, I think, 8 gig of RAM. It's a little flaky in the first place. It's not the best machine, but it handles this stuff just fine. It works really great with SDRuno and the RSPs and stuff like that. It struggles a little bit with trying to live stream and run this stuff, but it's mostly the screen capture program killing it. It's not so much the SDRuno or any of that. So you can use older hardware. I don't know the exact specs, and there may be information on their website about their minimum recommendations, but that's the route you can go with these things, which is kind of nice. So again, you can see here that we've got some air traffic. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's coming in. I don't see any planes at the moment. Well, we got this down here. I never didn't see that. Okay. I don't know if we've lost a feed over here or if we're just not receiving things at the moment. Let's see. If I look in here, it looks like it's still tracking stuff. And if we open up Virtual Radar Server, you can see that it's still working. So I guess it's just not displaying anything at the moment for whatever reason. Let's see. Terry Henderson, what about us Mac users? Is there ANT software that looks similar to SDRuno? There is, and I'm not familiar with it because I'm not a Mac guy, but there's something called Cubic SDR, I think, that people have used with Mac and Linux boxes. I had intended to do a video on using that software with Linux. I was going to take that computer that I just mentioned a little while ago, the old Celeron laptop that I have, and I went to the trouble of putting Linux on it, and I was going to start trying to use Cubic SDR and all that sort of thing with it just to see how it worked. But I ended up getting sidetracked, and I actually broke the laptop. I broke the screen on it. Long story, but anyway, it still works. I just have to use an external monitor on it and stuff. But one of these days, I'm going to try it myself and see. There's another YouTuber that's got a lot of information on that stuff, at least with Linux and Cubic SDR. I think it's Kevin Laughlin, I think is the guy you want to look up. He's got a lot of great information on that stuff. He's a good engineer. He knows this stuff in and out. So check his channel for some videos on that stuff. I don't know specifically if he has anything for Mac, but I think the Linux versions are similar, and that may get you pointed in the right direction. But yeah, I think the options for Mac are a little bit limited. I don't know. There may be versions. I don't know if there's a version of HDSDR that runs on Mac. I don't know if anybody else knows that, but I certainly don't. I'm not a Mac guy. So let's see here. I wonder why we're not getting any aircraft. It looks like we're receiving a bunch over here in the right corner, but we're not seeing them tracked here. I think what I'll do is close that. Maybe let's restart this and see if we get a view again. No, I don't know why it's not showing it again. You can see, like I said, you can see there's a bunch of aircraft listed, but they're not displaying anymore for some reason over here on the map, unless they're all way out of range or something. Doesn't look like it. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if something went wrong or if there's a setting that I have incorrect here, but this is where we're at. Audio not working. Are you not able to hear me, or are we just not hearing anything up here? Let's see. I'm going to tune around. Oh, here's a frequency. Just missed it. But that is okay. So this is one of the use cases for the new RSPduo. You can do things like this where you're receiving across two totally separate bands. You know, up here we've got the VHF ATSC traffic tuned in, and over here we're up in the gigahertz range monitoring the ADSB stuff. But another use case for this, and I haven't done much with it, but you can have two separate, completely separate bands here receiving at the same time. So let's say you want to listen to shortwave radio. So you're tuning around, 41 meters or something. You can be tuning around that band, and then you can have the second tuner set up. Say you're waiting for your buddy to contact you on 2 meters. You can put that up and just keep it muted, and then you'll hear him call for you. Another application, I guess, for this would be sort of diversity reception, where you could start trying to do noise canceling with two different antennas and stuff. And I haven't tried that yet. I'm not quite sure how you do it with this, or if there needs to be a little bit different software. But there's a lot of different applications for this. Oh, okay. So the audio came back. I wonder why it went out. Typical live stream stuff here. This stuff doesn't seem to always work right, and I've got older hardware here, so that's where I'm at. I'm not surprised. But I guess that's it in a nutshell. I don't know if anybody has any other questions or wants to see anything else. Looks like the attenuator was turned up on that a little. But like I said, this is kind of where we're at now. I mentioned it earlier in the video. I'm using my wife's laptop here, and I don't have the charger with it. Where she has it up in her art studio, it was more work to try and get the charger out of the area where she's got it than it was worth. So we're kind of limited on battery here. Not going to probably be able to hang in here too much longer, but if anybody has any other questions, feel free. Let's see. Oh, what's this? Or SDR? Oh, okay. Tom's put up a link here or something. Yeah. For SDR shortwave, check out webpage rtlsdr.com. Yeah, that's a good resource there for people. There's probably a lot more information there than I can provide, at least on basic shortwave listening. Or check out Tom's channel too. He's got a lot of great content over there. So the Mac software is similar. I think it's more similar to SDR console than SDRuno. I don't know if anybody in here has used it, Cubic SDR that is, but from what I've seen online, it looks more like SDR console than this. This SDRuno for some people is a little bit intimidating, I guess, at first, but once you get to use it, it's a pretty powerful software. And one of the things that I like about it that kind of throws people off at first is that you can move and arrange these windows however you want, which you can't really do it the same way in the other programs. You can change window sizes and things like that, but I think this gives you the most flexibility. But of course, it comes with some complexity. Okay, so Tom, I think he's asking about the maximum bandwidth. And that's a good question. One of the new things with the RSPduo is that when you're running it in dual tuner mode, your maximum bandwidth is, and you can kind of see up here, well, let me change it up to this 1 decimation. The maximum bandwidth that you can have is 2 megahertz. And you can then narrow it from there by choosing decimation options. Basically, what you're doing is you're dividing this spectrum range number by whatever this number is. So if you choose 4, for example, divides the 2 megahertz by 4 and goes down to 500 kilohertz. But the key is that in dual tuner mode, each tuner can be a maximum of 2 megahertz wide. But if we stop this and go back over to single tuner mode, which means you're using 1 tuner and 1 antenna, you can go up to the 10 megahertz full bandwidth that you can with the RSP1 and RSP2s. It kind of works the same way once you're in single tuner mode. The difference being that the RSPduo, the architecture gives it a little bit more performance. This is 14-bit ADC, I think, as opposed to the older units, which are 12. So you get a little bit more dynamic range. And there's a little bit more filtering in the RSPduo than some of the previous units. So that it gives you a little more performance. And I think the front end is just a little bit different too in the first place. So the receiver performance on this is better, whichever mode you run it in. Okay, so I don't know if the chat is up with what I'm speaking, but yeah, the maximum bandwidth on the 2 receivers is 2 megahertz each. Neither one can go wider, but you can make them narrower through the decimation. So you got your SDRuno by watching your videos. Oh, that's that's good. I've learned a lot from your videos too, Tom. Believe me. Let's see. Oh, looks like we got some planes showing up down here in the bottom. I'm using the wrong mouse now. There we go. We got some air traffic here again showing up. I'm not sure why they disappeared for a while, but there they are. But yeah, I like SDRuno. I like them all. I mean, I like SDR console. I like HD SDR. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. But for the RSPs, I've just gotten familiar and comfortable with SDRuno. So that's typically what I use when I'm fooling around with this stuff. And we got a strong signal coming in. Well, that's I'll probably wrap it up here unless anybody else has any specific questions. I can see that my battery is getting a little bit low. Like I said, I'm kind of limited on that right now. We got a few minutes. If there's any other questions, I'll kind of hang out for a second. Otherwise, I'll cut this short and see if it's stopped raining and go outside and do the yard work I've been putting off. Let's see. Tom is asking, I wonder if you can run 2 SDRplay 1s instead of this duo. That's a good question. You could probably do that. Let's see. I think you could do that with the new version of SDRuno. I think. Well, I'm not sure. What I'll tell you that I've done is on my other computer, I've got the older version of SDRuno installed along with the new version. I just didn't uninstall the other one. And sort of by accident, I figured out that you can have the RSPduo running in the new version of SDRuno alongside with, say, the RSP1 connected to and running the old version. It seems like they'll kind of commingle that way. But unless you do that, I don't know if the new version of SDRuno can do that. That's a worthy experiment to try. And that is another thing to worth mentioning is that the new version of SDRuno runs a little bit differently. It has sort of a Windows service behind it that runs in the background, and it is what sort of controls the dual tuners. It's a little bit different than the old software that just used a DLL or something like that. I'm not completely sure of what the architecture is, but I do know that the new version has a background service that's sort of running and looking for RSPs to kind of show up and then handle them. So it very well may be a possibility that you could run with this new version multiple, RSP1s or RSP2s or whatever, in addition to a duo. So maybe that's a good thing to try. So, like I said, I think I'll cut it off here. If anybody else has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, or send them to me later, and I'll try and address them. But for now, like I said, I think we'll cut this off. It's getting close to 9, and I'll see. Let's see. Billy says, "Have a great day. Unfortunately, wet here today, so no riding. Good day to hang out on the bands, enjoy the yard work." Not, yeah. I'd like to be riding. I've let me tell you, I haven't done much at all. I've ridden around town so far this year, and that's it. When I've had time, the weather hasn't been good, and when the weather's been good, I haven't had time. So, I'm going to try and play hooky from work one day this week and do some riding, but I don't know if that's going to work out. We'll see. I'm sort of in the last 2 weeks of the job I'm working now, and I don't want to shortchange them. But I know I won't have any time in my new job here coming up probably for the rest of the summer. So we'll see what happens. But Kyle, thanks for stopping in. And Tom, thanks for stopping in. Billy, everybody else who's in there, thanks for stopping in and checking out the RSPduo. If you don't already have one of these, they're definitely worth putting on your list for consideration. So catch you guys later. Let's see if I can figure out how to stop this thing now. Oh, I'm over here.